Okay, guys, Damien here. I'm back. Part two. You don't have to watch the first part to watch this. In part one, I covered some comics that I'd been catching up on and covered and showed a few things I bought at a store. So now I'm going to talk about more of the comic books I read this week, which are all comic books that came out this week. Pretty Deadly. Pretty disappointing writing wise. The art is beautiful. I think I'm just gonna keep getting it for the art unless my pull list gets too big, unless something else comes along. Just beautiful, beautiful combination of color and art. The premise of the storytelling is that the whole story, I believe, is supposed to be told by these bones of a bunny, jokingly called Bones Bunny, I guess, instead of Bugs Bunny. And the story is being told to the butterfly. And that's kind of mythological and jokey at the same time, and I could see Neil Gaiman or someone like that pulling it off. Maybe they'll still pull this book off, but I had trouble with the first issue. I felt further lost, even though it was less complex in this second issue. I couldn't tell why characters were doing what. It was very violent. People were being basically tortured and killed. Children were involved. I don't know people's motivations. Maybe this will all read great in a trade when you have the full story to get. These are potentially interesting characters, especially Big Alice seems to interest me. Why they're all fighting with swords all of a sudden. I don't know, would I accept this more if it were, if I'd picked it up at that store I mentioned in the other video where they do really way out, sell really way out zines and unusual small press comics that don't have much of a narrative, usually much of a story. Maybe I just have an expectation from an Image comic. But in any case, for me, it's just the art, and I usually expect strong storytelling from Image. And from most of the mainstream comic book publishers. Let's see. Well, so on the plus side, Saga, which has never disappointed me, but has perhaps slowed down a bit. This felt like a particularly strong issue. Things seem to be coming back into focus more strongly. The art, maybe I need to. Every issue I feel like, ooh, her art's getting even better. But maybe it's just so good that all along I keep feeling like it's getting better, even though it's just always really good. And one thing I'm kind of noticing with her, because she does her own colors, I believe, yeah. And I'm noticing artists who do their own colors in a lot of these indie books doing really incredible stuff. I feel almost like the art of creating a comic book is taking some leaps forward with the artists that really take control of the color, because so much can be done with computerized color nowadays. So like the artist Chip Zdarsky in Sex Criminals does incredible stuff, by combining his line art and the color. And so does Saga. So some people have said they really love this cover. Ironically, this is even though I loved the art in this issue, this is one of my less favorite colors. Has a nice color scheme to it, I guess. Yeah, I guess I just don't want to say too much about the plot, but Saga continues to be well worth it, giving me a lot of pleasure. A lot of bang for the buck. Letter 44 is actually a great cover by the artist. Where do they say his name? Alberto Jimenez Albuquerque. great cover, but to me, on the interior art, it feels like he was. To me, it feels like he was being lazy. He wasn't putting in a lot of work in thinking out how to tell this story in interesting ways. The script itself is really interesting, and maybe he's the wrong artist to work with Charles Soule. I don't know. Having seen Charles Soule work with some really good artists over at DC has perhaps affected me a bit too. It's very flat layouts, if you will. Like the camera doesn't move much. It's not. It's like the art is just there to hold the dialogue at times. But this is a really good science fiction story. I wasn't too excited about the political side of it in issue 1, but I'm getting more interested in that too. This president isn't entirely predictable. You think the plot's going to go one way with him, but it may go another way. And the story on the spaceship's very interesting, very intriguing, especially with the very pregnant member of the crew, and the talk about not knowing who the father was and not wanting to know who the father was, deciding that the baby is going to be the whole crew's father. It's like there's a whole interesting backstory that we're just getting glimpses of to the experiences this crew has had on their way to visit the strange anomaly in space. Yeah, that's like one of the better pictures by this artist. I hate to slam an artist. I mean, maybe it's because and I think maybe this artist might be better on some other material. He just doesn't seem suited to a science fiction story, perhaps. I don't know. But it was worth reading. I'm a little bummed that it's a $4 book. When I'm paying $4, I guess I would wish to be blown away by the art and the writing. Here's a book where I wasn't blown away by anything, but all by creators that I generally like a lot. Like most of the art was by Chris Sprouse, whose art I like a lot, but the story just seemed lackluster, and the artist didn't seem right for it either. The characters, I don't know. It just maybe because I'm so used to the Manapool art, it just didn't feel. The cover's by Francis Manapool, and the story's by Manapool and his writing partner Chris Buccicello. And then the last bits of art are done by Manapool. Although it might be my imagination, but it feels like they're Manapool light. That Manapool was a bit rushed here and not as inventive as he usually is. But it's a. I'm sorry, I'm being kind of incoherent. It's a year zero story, a 0 year story, with the extra dollar price and a few extra pages. But for me, as a reader who's been really enjoying The Flash, it was just a waste of time. It didn't even feel like, it's about Barry Allen before he was the Flash, working kind of solving crimes, but it didn't feel like it was really a story about Barry Allen or something, and it didn't feel like he did that much in it, even though there was a crime and it was kind of resolved by the end. And there was kind of a commentary about what police are like in Gotham versus what the kind of policeman Barry Allen would be. It seems odd that they would have sent this rookie to Gotham City to work with hardened, experienced street cops. So I think from what I hear about other Zero things, they're all kind of forced. And it's really a shame that every story arc in Batman has to. The story arcs in Batman are good, but that they have to take over so many other comics. It would have been fun if there was a really great Flash 0 year story to be told. The Flash 0 issue that they did about a year ago was actually quite good. It was one of the few good 0 issues in my memory. But I'm sticking with Flash. I'm excited to see where it goes next. Five Ghosts. I've read issue 6 and I've read issue 7. I still have to read the trade of the last issues. I enjoyed this. It was just the beginning of a story with a lot of pulpy fun, which is what as everyone says, what you should expect from Five Ghosts. I can't really tell where this story arc is going yet, but I'm definitely having an easy time going with it. The art reminds me of the old Frank Miller, Klaus Janson art and maybe of some Klaus Janson art by himself, but of the 80s pre-Batman Frank Miller era, which is, I like that art a lot. So it does a good job of telling the story in pictures. So fun comic book. What do I pay for this? $2.99. Very worth $2.99. I think that Black Science was $3.50, and it's well worth that just for the art alone. This is painted art, I think, or digitally painted over the drawing. So the artist is Matteo Scalera, but the color artist is Dean White, and the color kind of dominates. Obviously, the two artists are working together, and the whole comes from both of them together. It's definitely, another example of the rise of the colorist as a really important thing. Some of these scenes are almost like Frank Frazetta paintings. It's like a science fiction fan's wet dream, really, at least a visual science fiction fan's wet dream. It's hard to tell you the story by Rick Remender, who's very good when he's dealing with science fiction, I think. The story has not laid the science fiction groundwork yet. We got exotic locales, and we got a character sort of in desperate straits, who's an anarchist scientist, so that's interesting. But there's a lot that's not clear yet. So I'm still waiting to see. I can't imagine that I won't have a lot of fun reading this comic book, but I'm still waiting to see if, in terms of the overall story, if this is going to be brilliant or just kind of something lighter than that you just enjoy for the adventure and not much else. So overall, it's on thick paper, another lovely package from Image Comics. I'm just more and more wanting more and more of these good Image Comics, because when they're good, they're so good, and they're serving us readers and lovers of comics well. Despite all that, one of my favorite comics of this week was, despite mostly loving the indie comics, was Adventures of Superman. Superman is the core of mainstream comics, right? The beginning, the ultimate symbol of it, and it works so well in Adventures of Superman, which, as most of you know, is standalone stories that are either 10, 20, or 30 pages, and each issue is 30 pages of story. So this issue had a 20-page story and a 30-page story. The standout was this one, Saved, the 20-page story by David Lapham, doing writing and art. Really nice, clean art, perfect for this kind of classic Superman feel. But it's Superman facing a really complicated moral situation of people who believe in him as a messiah-type figure, a religious figure. And they actually want to show Superman how much they believe in him by jumping off buildings and just having faith that he will come and rescue them. But it gets out of hand very quickly, and Superman has to deal with it. And it's for a 20-page story, they have a pretty clever twist in how they deal with it, and nothing too shockingly surprising, but still it works. And it's just a very satisfying story that gives us a nice look at Superman. And the other one, the 10-page story, is written by Tim Seeley and art by Mike Norton, the team behind Revival, and also now doing what's the name? They're doing a book at Dark Horse too. The art was really nice. The script was fun. It was a little juxtaposition between an orphan in an orphanage and what's going on with Superman, and they connect up at the end. And so it was very satisfying too. Just really nice. I hope they can keep this up with Adventures of Superman. As I've said before, it's one of my favorite books right now, and this was a top of the line issue. So giving me a lot of faith that it will continue to be really great. And you have to, when a series like this with all these stories that they have to get all these different creators to do, you have to do a nod of the hat to the editors, really. Pardon me. I don't have my reading glasses on. Alex Antone is the editor. Is the editor of all of these, or? Alex Antone is the editor of both of these, so he's, I would guess, in my limited knowledge of what editors do, is pulling together a really nice book. An anthology book like this has a lot to do, I think, with the editorial judgment. So Outliers here, I don't really think of them as indie books. I mean, IDW is a smaller publisher, but books based on well-established cartoons, old cartoons that don't exist anymore, feel like strictly commercial properties to me. And I get them to read with my daughter, but they're surprisingly good. Especially Powerpuff Girls is surprisingly cool art. I know the art is very close to the TV show, but I only watched the TV show a little, and I've never really clicked with it because I was the wrong age, etc. And my daughter hasn't clicked with it yet, although she loves it in the comic book. But I feel like I enjoy the art even more in the comic book than in the TV show. So, yeah, fun stuff. Someone named Troy Little did the art and the writing. I think a lot of these, I don't know for sure on this one, but I know with Adventure Time, they bring in a lot of artists who have veterans of web comics. So I don't know if that's why some of these are so good. On the other hand, Peabody and Mr. Sherman has Shali Fish as the writer, who is a kind of standard, writes a lot of the kids' comic books at DC. When DC has kids' comic books. I think he's writing the Batman and Scooby-Doo, which I meant to pick up and forgot to. The art here for Peabody and Sherman, which is a really old show, I think it goes to the early 70s or even 60s. I'm not positive, but I think when I saw them as a kid, they were reruns. They were, Peabody and Sherman were a short little segment in the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. I think in the 60s or early 70s, the Rocky and Bullwinkle show might have even been a primetime TV show. I'm not sure. But so Shali Fish does a really good job of taking the standard Peabody and Sherman stories and making them a lot of fun. This is a lot of fun to read with a kid. So both of these, if you have small children, small girls, small boys, I think will really enjoy these stories. The Powerpuff Girls is not a standalone, so it'd be a little hard to jump in on this book. It seems written for the trade. This is issue 3. You could probably jump in on issue 2 and figure things out, even though it connects a little bit to issue 1. But issue 2 and issue 3 feel pretty tightly connected, and it is to be continued at the end. Although the to be continued part, it does have a certain amount of resolution. It's just the overarching thing where all the villains have become good, and Buttercup doesn't believe it and is upset by it because she wants to to beat up villains more often. That part is not resolved. And my one complaint is the to be continued. I think I mentioned this last time, because it's really tough on a small kid to wait a whole month for another installment of a story. Maybe on a weekly comic book that would make more sense. Okay, well, I've unburdened myself yet again of my week's reading. I'm now going to be trying to catch up on reading Green Arrow and maybe Hawkeye. I'm also not caught up on Hawkeye. I think I've got 4 issues of Hawkeye and maybe 6 issues of Green Arrow to read. So that may be what I do next, or maybe some of the indie comics I picked up. Also on the comic book roundtable right at the end, I showed this entire box of comics that I bought for $20 at a kind of ridiculous Black Friday sale. So this is 180 comics out of what is normally the 50-cent boxes. I don't know when I'll get around to read those, but I have a bunch of the series Warp, which was done by Frank Brenner, that I picked up here, and I'd already picked up some before. So I think I may have enough of those to read in order, and I'm looking forward to reading that. It's an early independent comic that Frank Brenner tried out when he left Marvel, which was based on a play that I think only was done in Chicago, I believe, called Warp, a science fiction play from the early 70s. Anyhow, talk to you all later. Bye.